Welcome to Therapist Confidential, a psychotherapy.net podcast. And now, here's your host, Travis Heath.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Therapist Confidential podcast. I'm your host, Travis Heath. And today I am flying solo, going to talk about certainty. Maybe we'd even call it like a culture of certainty. Because it does feel like we're living in an age of certainty. And by that, I don't mean that things are actually certain. I mean that the way that we speak and the way that we seem to make sense of the world often feels certain. Yet internally, we often feel a lot of uncertainty. It's quite a contradiction. It seems people, are more comfortable declaring something than they are wondering about something. Everybody has opinions. Boy, do they have opinions. But it feels like there are fewer and fewer questions. And it almost feels to me like certainty has become some sort of, how would you say, maybe like a social currency almost. Like on social media, for example, you rarely see posts where people are talking about thinking about something. Like, I'm still thinking about this. I'm still thinking this through. I'm uncertain. Everyone seems to have a definitive answer, whether it's politics, parenting, gender, relationships, therapy, AI, education, whatever it is. Everybody seems to have definitive answers. But again, the contradiction there is that often internally we feel like we don't have that. So we feel a lot of uncertainty internally often, yet we're surrounded by what appears to be certainty, everywhere around us in the world. And expertise is interesting too, because it seems that, folks feel like they're experts after they watch a few videos or they read a few posts. I mean, people are ready to declare things with such certainty. And so that led me to a question, which is really the genesis of this particular podcast episode, which is, why does it feel like certainty is increasing while complexity is increasing as well? Because as complexity increases, it would seem to me that certainty would likely decrease. But yet it seems both of these things are increasing simultaneously, which is an interesting phenomenon. Now, as therapists, what do we notice? I mean, I think that we notice, I know I certainly notice, many clients arriving with painful uncertainty. And maybe sometimes also painful certainty, or what they feel like should be certainty. By that I mean, the suffering that is the story that they've been convinced is true about themselves or about the world. And it's like a part of them knows that that's uncertain somewhere, but yet they've been convinced it's true, and it's like an objective truth. So clients may arrive in our offices with painful certainties or feelings of certainty, or that they should be certain, and also painful uncertainties. I'll give you some examples. How about, I'm never going to find a romantic partner? I mean, I think a lot of therapists cue into that language right away. Never. I'm never going to find a romantic partner. So there's certainty in that, right? The certainty is I'm never going to find the partner. But the uncertainty that exists in that is this sense of, if I don't have a partner, what does that mean for me in the world? Can I be happy? Will I be a complete person, right? So there's a painful certainty and a painful uncertainty, or set of uncertainties, that exist in that statement. Another example, I don't know if people say it this way, but often something like, I'm fundamentally broken. My childhood ruined me. Nobody respects me. Maybe when they lose a job or their job's threatened, my career is over. If I make the wrong choice or a suboptimal choice, I'll destroy my future. So what's interesting about therapy is people come to us with these observations or feelings. And therapy, in a way, can be a place where certainty starts cracking. It can be a place where people can start to feel that uncertainty, which can sound like a good thing, right? Oh, come into the nest and feel the uncertainty, right? But that can also be very destabilizing in a world that's telling you everything should be so certain. And if you're not, what's wrong with you? Now, this isn't just the people we serve. We also, as therapists, we have our own certainties, or at least what we think are certainties. We often assume when people come in that their problems, maybe every problem is trauma. Maybe every problem is due to attachment. Maybe every relationship difficulty is due to a narcissist or narcissism. We might become overly attached to a particular model of therapy. We might decide that we understand what makes a client tick before we actually do, right? Like, I've seen this before. And we sort of jump, to conclusions. And I'll tell all of you that some of my biggest mistakes as a therapist happened when I thought I already knew what was going on when I didn't. And, I could probably extend this beyond just being a therapist and saying some of the biggest mistakes of my life have happened when I thought I already knew what was going on when I didn't. In other words, when I had certainty. I think there is a difference between, let's say, confidence and certainty. I don't think these are the same things. I mean, for example, to have confidence as a therapist, confidence can exist in any realm, but to have confidence as a therapist, we might be saying things like, I have experience, I can help. And because I have experience and I can help, maybe it gives us a little patience and we can say, let's explore this together. That's confidence. Whereas certainty is saying, I already know. I already know. I've seen this before. I already know. Now, we might have seen something before and we could go, oh yeah, I think I've seen a pattern that looks like this, right? That's definitely something that happens. Sometimes we recognize patterns. But any of you that have been a therapist for any amount of time, you also know those moments when we get surprised, when we think we know how the story is going to go and it goes a different direction. That's always kind of exciting to me. But this difference between confidence and certainty, I think, is important. Thinking of an example, imagine a client that says, and boy, I see this a lot in the work that I do. They come to me and they're saying, well, I want a divorce from my partner. Confidence might say something like, okay, I've run into this before in my work. Let's try and understand what's happening. Certainty would say something like, you should leave. So, you start hearing the story and maybe all of us have those moments of judgment, right? But certainty would say you should leave. Confidence is like, okay, I hear you. Let's continue to understand what's happening. Confidence might also say something like, if someone says, I want to stay or I want to leave, well, let's understand why you want to do that. How have you come to that conclusion? Whereas certainty would say, you should stay or you should leave. I think part of this is certainty can be intoxicating. It can feel really good. It can reduce anxiety. It certainly simplifies the world, and in a world that feels maybe as confusing as it ever has, and it's moving as quickly as it ever has, for something to reduce our anxiety, to simplify the world, these are things that feel good. It gives us a sense of control when we have certainty. For example, if I can identify a villain, all this bad stuff is happening because of that person, then I don't have to sit with the ambiguity. If I can identify a psychiatric diagnosis of some sort, then I can feel relief. Oh, it's because of that. And if I know in any given situation exactly who's right and who's wrong, isn't that a nice dichotomy? Right and wrong? Then life becomes simpler. And that's the other thing certainty does, or another thing that certainty does, is it creates dichotomies, right? Good or bad, right or wrong, yes or no. And this sort of thing makes me wonder if this culture of certainty that we seem to be living through right now is less about truth, whatever that means, and more about comfort. So that when people are out in the world making certain claims, it isn't really about truth. It's more about helping them feel more comfortable in the world. Now, as I was saying earlier, our relationship as therapists with not knowing. Therapy, I think ideally, is one of the few places where uncertainty is welcomed. Hopefully, we can help people stay with questions they might be having about themselves, the world at large, maybe longer than they would otherwise. And maybe even sometimes longer than what feels comfortable, So going back to that example of the couple, like the question of, should I leave? Or even, if we were certain, we would say you should leave. But I think it's really more a question, should I leave? We could explore additional questions that raises, like what's keeping you here? What's pulling you away? What are you most afraid of? Those questions deepen the exploration without a sense of certainty, but just with a sense of trying to understand. And maybe instead of asking questions like, am I happy? Which of course I think people ask that question in therapy and elsewhere frequently, am I happy? Maybe we would take that further and we would ask a question like, what does happiness even mean to you? And how would you know if you found it? Right? Hopefully we help folks not take things for granted. A word like happy, which if we're not careful, we just assume we know what that means. But I think in therapy, when it's going optimally, we don't take that for granted. I think in our work too, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but there's been this rise of diagnostic certainty. I mean, I hear more people speaking the language of the DSM and diagnostic language than ever before. The examples, oh boy, I hear this one all the time. My ex is a narcissist. I have trauma. I'm avoidantly attached. My boss is toxic. I have a dysfunctional family. I mean, all of this language has existed for some time, but boy, it feels to me like that language is being used even more these days. And there's nuance to this, of course, because I'm not saying those concepts are useless. They can definitely be useful. However, they become limiting when they stop being descriptions and start becoming identities, right? If you've listened to this podcast or watched the webinars on psychotherapy.net with Tom Carlson and Sunny Palyaka, I mean, and some of my other narrative friends, they call these unstories, right? And by unstory, I mean, we take a word like narcissist. That's just a description or a label. And all of a sudden it becomes an identity and we're not even sure exactly what we're talking about, right? I mean, I'll give you another example of one I hear all the time, gaslighting. When people bring up that term gaslighting, I've had to just stop the conversation and pause it for a minute and go, okay, I've heard that word and I think I have a working understanding of what it means. When you use that word, what does it mean? And I find out I get all sorts of different descriptions, right? So we've got this lingo and we've got what seems like this phenomenon of descriptions that start becoming identities. And within that leads to certainties about people's identities, certain conclusions, because, for example, I think you may have heard this one before. I mean, I heard it over 2 decades ago in graduate school. I still hear it out in the therapeutic world. Oh, you can't treat a narcissist. You can't treat a narcissist in therapy. It's like, dang, that's a heck of a story right there. I mean, it's not like, gosh, I've worked with someone who's had the label of narcissist before, and I found it challenging in X, Y, and Z ways. I've also found it rewarding. And no, it's certain, right? They can't be helped. They can't be treated. And, I think for many of us, this certainty is not just about politics in the world or ideas or what we think about the world, but it also applies in our relationships. And of course, that's our romantic relationships, but it also can apply in familial relationships, friendships, work relationships, right? I think probably what I'll talk about here, most people will relate to romantic relationships, but certainty can be deadly to relationships. When we start saying things like, I know what you meant, I know why you did that, I know who you really are, these kinds of claims. And it's reasonable to believe 20 plus years of, doing couples work and also, for myself as a human being in the world, most relationship conflict, seems to involve when people become certain about another person's motives, etc. And of course, I think good couples therapy, at least a component of it, is often when we replace that certainty with more curiosity. I'll give you an example from a couple I'm working with now. I'm going to keep it very general, so obviously I'll maintain confidentiality here, but I'll just give you the sort of basic framework of what's happening. So from the time that they've come in, the husband this is a heterosexual couple, and the husband, he has had this stance of, she doesn't respect me. And he has all of his reasons why he doesn't feel respected. And her perspective in this relationship is that he doesn't care. And these stories have become really large. They've just sort of festered over many years, right? And it's like anything that she does, he's going to find the lack of respect in it, right? And anything that he does, she's going to find some way that he's not demonstrating adequate care. Now, of course, there are times, undoubtedly, right, where perhaps he is behaving in ways that aren't showing much care, and she might be behaving in ways that aren't demonstrating much respect. But also, over time, we discover neither of those statements is fully true. And again, in this episode, we're talking about certainty, right? And the issues begin when they're certain. He is certain she doesn't respect me. She is certain he doesn't care. And so here, the problem for them wasn't a lack of information. It was certainty. Because it wouldn't matter how much, and it didn't matter how much information the other party gave. They were just so entrenched in these particular stories and so certain. I used to teach a history and systems of psychology course when I was teaching undergrads back in the day at Metropolitan State University of Denver. And in history and systems, I used to teach Michel de Montaigne, French philosopher. And he has this great line, and it stuck with me. Obviously, I'm sharing it with you here. It goes something like this. Of course, it's translated, so hopefully I'll get it right. But this is from memory, but something to the effect of, nothing is so firmly believed as that which is known least. Nothing is so firmly believed as that which is known least. I always found this so fascinating, right? So often, that we know the least about, we are most certain about. I'll give you an easy example of this. Well, it's not easy. It's apparent, but it's not easy. Death. I mean, if you look around, people are so certain about death. They're so certain what happens after death, right? And for some people, that's religion. For some people, it's science. For some people, it's whatever it is. It's philosophical, etc. But people are, gosh, they firmly believe it. And yet, we don't know what happens after death. I'm not going to, get on my own soapbox here and give my own theories about that. Other than to say, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, as near as I can tell, I think we just die and then that's the end. But I don't know. I don't know. Yet so many people will tell you they absolutely know. And I think some of that goes back to, with regard to death, the removal of anxiety and perhaps grief and other things. So we so often feel certain about things that are impossible to fully know. We're certain about other people. We're certain about the future. We're certain about ourselves. We're certain about the meaning of our lives or what the meaning of a life should be. And I think Montaigne has it right. Nothing is so firmly believed as that which we know least. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about what aging has done to me. Transparently, I'm 46 now. Sounds weird to say. I was watching a movie with my kids the other day, and, one of the characters in the movie, I think it was Back to the Future, one of the characters in the movie was 47 or something. I remember watching that when I was a kid in the 80s and going like, dang, 47 felt so old, and here I am at 46, It's wild how that goes. But one thing I've noticed getting older is that I'm pretty sure I haven't become smarter. I've learned some stuff, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I haven't picked up more knowledge and hopefully some wisdom more along the way, but I don't know that I've become that much smarter. One thing I am noticing is I'm becoming less certain. And maybe part of that's because of the work I do as a therapist, and those of you listening who are therapists might experience something similar. But human beings, the longer I live and interact with human beings, we are far stranger and more complicated than I once believed we were. Like when I was in my 20s, I thought we were much simpler creatures. I'm not so sure now. I mean, there have been people I have deeply admired in the world who have disappointed me. There have been people that I dismissed internally that really surprised me to the good side. There were stories, that I thought I understood, and I understood like the totality of them, that turned out to have entire chapters missing. And so the older I've gotten, the more I'm noticing the complexity of being human and of being in an interaction and relationship with humans. And I don't know that I've gotten smarter because of it. Like in my 20s, I think I thought human beings were simpler creatures. In my 30s, I think I started to go, oh, I've seen enough of these patterns. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Like I think I can have a pretty firm understanding of what humans are going to do. I couldn't. And then in my 40s, now I'm just more in this place of like, I'm not quite certain what human beings will do. Even when I think I'm certain, like now when I start to feel more certain, I get nervous. That didn't happen in my 30s. Now in my 40s, when I start to feel certainty about something, I notice myself getting nervous. And I think that's a sense of wisdom. What's happening there, I think, is a part of me is warning the rest of me, like, uh-oh, pay attention here. You know what's happened before when you thought you were certain about something? And boy, my 20-year-old self needed a lot more of that. I wish I had more of that. Um, and I'll say, I think my 20-year-old self was probably objectively happier than my 46-year-old self. Maybe it's the ignorance is bliss thing. I don't know. But I think my 46-year-old self has a level of depth that my 20-year-old self didn't. And I think part of that is coming to terms with this conundrum of uncertainty. All right, so what about therapy? And what does therapy maybe teach about uncertainty or certainty for that matter? I think a lot of times when people come to see us, they think therapy is a journey toward certainty. Like that the longer we do this, we're going to have more certainty, and then I'll have more certainty and I'll feel less anxiety, depression, whatever it is. My trauma won't impact me as much, etc., and I'll feel better. And the more I've done this, the more I actually think that therapy is a journey toward complexity, not toward certainty. I'm wondering more and more if mental health really rests upon being able to say things like, I don't know. I could be wrong. I messed up. Maybe there's more to this story than I'm seeing. Hey, I'm new to this and I'm still learning. These sorts of things. And again, I was talking about previous versions of myself. I mean, things that younger versions of myself didn't want to say. In my 20s, I absolutely didn't want to say, oh, I'm not quite sure about this. I'm still learning. Even if I was still learning, I had to find some way to feel as though I was certain and I knew what was going on. And there's lots of reasons why. Maybe some of that is youth. Some of that is probably in terms of gender and being socialized as a man. I mean, there's lots of different factors, right? But I am wondering more and more if a sign of mental health is the ability to say, I don't know. And the ability to say, I might be wrong. And I guess not to just say it, anyone can say it, but to actually live that way and believe it. So as I close out this episode, I'll leave you with some questions that maybe for you to think about. I've been thinking about these questions. I'm in the process of writing a book, which is a dangerous endeavor where I've been pondering some of these questions and also, just thinking about them prior to this episode. One question that came up for me was, what am I most certain about right now? I asked that question. What am I most certain about right now? Interesting. It's in some ways, a hard question to answer, in some ways, an easy one. I mean, there's like particular relationships that I'm very certain about in terms of how I feel. But what's weird is there's an uncertainty because you never know what's going to happen in a relationship. Like a person in that relationship, me or the other person, could die. They could literally die tomorrow. Something could happen that makes the relationship more distant or ends it. So it's interesting when I thought about what I'm most certain about now, it's like I was certain about the feelings that I had towards people in my life and certain relationships. And yet there's this uncertainty that will always exist with regard to how long these relationships might last. Another question that was interesting to me is, in what ways is certainty maybe protecting me from something? Maybe a feeling of anxiety or dread or worry. What is it that certainty might be protecting me from? And then this one, if you've listened to these previous podcasts, I'm sure you've heard this sort of thing from me before. But what if curiosity could serve me better than certainty? And what's interesting about that question is intellectually, I know that that's true. But sometimes emotionally or in the midst of relationships, that's harder to practice. So it's easy for me to say, oh, yeah, sure, be curious. But some of the times where I drift towards certainty or wanting to be certain about something are emotionally tumultuous times. And those are the times that I need curiosity the most. And these questions that I've been wrestling with have left me starting to wonder whether wisdom is not having better answers. Maybe wisdom is actually developing a better relationship with not knowing. And I'll leave you on that note for today. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for listening to these solo episodes. Thanks for listening to the interviews. Thanks for emailing me, and some of you that live near where I live, having conversations about the podcast episodes. That's really been such an awesome part of doing this. And if you're enjoying it, do the rating thing. Give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube or wherever you might be listening to this. Pass it on to some friends if you're finding it interesting or meaningful. All right. Take care, everyone. Until next time.